إليكم الآن. نستأنف الجلسة
Now
الثانية
we
مع
resume
كلمة
our
العلامة
second
الشيخ
session with
معالي
a speech by His
الشيخ عبد
Excellence
الله بن بية.
Sheikh Abdullah
فليتفضل
bin
مشكورا.
Bayer. Go ahead, sir, please.
الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل وبارك على سيدنا محمد نبي الرحمة وعلى آله وصحبه.
Praise be to Allah, Lord of the worlds,
أعود
and peace and blessings of God be upon His Prophet Muhammad.
كلمة تطيرية
I take the speech again to give a framework
توجه
presentation
مظانين
to explain the content of the conference and
سوف أحاول
to share with you the issues that we are going to be grappling with.
ولهذا على الأفاضل المترجمين
I hope the interpreters
متابعة ذلك.
will follow my speech because we have changed the original.
حال السعادة
Firstly, I would like to welcome you, Your Excellencies,
والسماحة والغلطة والنجاح.
and Your Eminences, Your Beatitudes,
الحضور الكريم كل باسمه وشميل واسمه.
each of you in their name
السلام عليكم ورحمة
and in your title. God's peace and blessings be upon you all.
اللقاء السابع اليوم.
This today is our 7th forum, and it takes place in unusual circumstances and in
القلوب تتواصل
exceptional
والأجساد
ways.
تتباعد للظروف التي تعرفها.
Our hearts are joined together while our minds, but our bodies remain separated
يمثل نموذج
as a necessity for these days.
وهو أمر معروف لديكم.
The forum has consistently pioneered new models and dialogues, and it's unique and it's known to all of you. It represents a dialogue between civilizations and meetings of minds and hearts amongst people in a specific place and over a specific period of time. However, this year we are meeting in a context of great challenges all humanity is facing. The corona pandemic is a new type of affliction for humanity. It is not, of course, the first pandemic, but it is unique in many ways because it tests our values and our patience and our relationships to one another.
مظاهرها متعددة.
This crisis has many manifestations, and faces us with many choices between the need to save our health and to save our economies. Struggle between the challenge to protect human life and safeguard wealth, to maintain people's movement and trades, while lockdowns provide the only means to ensure that the spread of pandemic is limited. There's also a struggle between the scientific research logic and the logic of the marketplace. There have been scientific endeavors based on cooperation, whilst the logic of the market dictates competition and monopoly. And many companies around the world make their financial profit a priority, and they have sought to exploit people's situations in these health circumstances in order to maximize their profits. Not astronomical necessarily, but they are great profits. And some parts of the world benefit at the expense of others. There's also a struggle between certainty and doubts. And the pandemic has made us realize that there is no class or race,
مأمونة ولا مضمونة.
no matter how developed or evolved we are. No one is safe from these emergencies, and the journey we take on this planet is not always safe and guaranteed. Science and technology used to provide modern humans with a sense of certainty. But today, it became clear that we cannot secure our own destinies, and we can't have confidence in the future. There's also a struggle between the nation states and globalization. Globalization is necessary for exchange of information, exchange of benefits, and the fruits of scientific research. There is also a struggle between the logic of freedom and the logic of duty. There is the question of the freedom of citizens, freedom of movement, freedom of interaction between them, and trade and education and religious observance. And this is often faced by the choices of individuals. And now we hear the language of public duty in our common discourse after decades of focus purely on personal freedoms and individual rights. There's also another struggle going on between the universal interests of life versus the religious freedoms, on the primary effects of this country in the religious spheres. In the Emirates Council for Legal Fatwa, we addressed an important aspect of this struggle in our conference on the fiqh of contingencies. And this was conducted in conjunction with the Muslim World League, and it was an opportunity to direct the attention of religious scholars to the necessity of employing independence and novel legal reasoning to ascertain the position of sacred law regarding a number of new issues related to religious faith and practice in order to facilitate the religious observance of Muslims and put them at ease regarding their affairs. This crisis has also taught us very valuable lessons and has exposed many forgotten realities. It's exposed that humankind is essentially weak. And we have been resting on our laurels, if we wish, and show that our weakness is essential, is an essential part of us. And God says in the Quran, man was created weak. It has also demonstrated the limits of human knowledge and understanding, which were results of man's humility. It has also exposed the fact that we cannot predict the future, and many people have been predicting the future and were expecting the world to be born on its own for the future. And the pandemic has drastically also has slowed down the speed of modern life and thus given us timely opportunity to contemplate our values. And while it has stopped the fast pace of our lives, it has given us an opportunity to revalue and to rethink. And thus our minds were opened and our hearts were opened to the possibility, to further exploration of the possibilities that lie before us. And all this is not an impossible achievement. And it's not a utopian dream. If we are able to draw the right lessons and inspiration from our present circumstances, the birth of a new human being will not take place in a single day, and it will not happen all at once. But this new birth can only take place if we have the means and that we can set in motion today. And after all, the future is nothing but the fruit of the present in the flow of time, and the future is constantly formed out of this present. In the same way that the present is made from the past. So the present is where the future is made. And we should take care of the present in preparation for the future. And I don't want to spend too much time on these philosophical matters, but I would like to simply say that the conference, which we are launching today, seeks to find the possibilities of establishing joint future together, based on solidarity and fraternity and peace. And this is why we have adopted this slogan of the meeting, the title of the meeting, which is the values in the post-COVID world, solidarity and the spirit of the passengers on the ship. So what is this ship? It is an example that was given by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, about humanity. In a hadith in which he said the similitude of the one upholding the laws of God and the one breaking them are like a group of people who drew lots on where they should sit in the ship. And thus some sat on the top deck and others were in the galley. And when the ones in the galley were in need of water, they would go on to the deck, passing by the others. And at some point, they decided that if they were to just bore a hole in the hull, they could draw water out of it without having to go upstairs. And those on the top deck those on the top deck had allowed them to do so, they would have all drowned. But if they restrained them, they would have all survived. They would have saved themselves and saved the others. And this hadith gives us an analogy of the situation of humanity, a profound metaphor for the state of humanity and their common trajectory and their shared destiny. Even though the ship has different levels, that all passengers are on this one ship. And this is why we speak about the spirit of the passengers of the ship. The spirit of the passengers of the ship is seen today in that humanity on this planet are truly on one ship, in one boat. This is called the age of the global village. And we have seen the true manifestations of interconnection between us. With the environment, we all live in one environment, and what happens in one continent is felt of another one. And we've seen in Chernobyl, the explosion didn't simply impact its direct environments, but spread throughout the region and remains over time. It is one environment which we all share. There is no one state, one country, no one nation that has its own layer of the ozone with which it can do what it wishes. So this is the simile of the passengers on the same ship. No one country has its own air to breathe and can pollute as it likes. Everyone will pay the price without exception. So this is the connection that we live in. And the virus appeared in a very distant area, a distant corner of the world. And in a matter of a few short weeks, it managed to spread around the world. And it left no country, nor city, no village not impacted by it. And it harmed every village and town around the world. And ironically, it made use of the same man-made routes and modes of transport to carry itself throughout the world. And in the context of rediscovering and becoming conscious of this interconnection, we've also been aware or have become aware of the commonality we have with other plants and animals on this planet. Now that we have described the issue of interconnection between people and under the so-called globalization, and all this is very clear. Now, what is this spirit of the ship and the passengers of the ship? This spirit has particular form and substance and goal, and the substance is the faith that is of shared responsibility. Its form is solidarity and cooperation. Its goal is the preservation of universal interests, which are in turn expressed by the legal import of the hadith. And it is about the protection of the collective wealth, which is life and property, etc. And on board this ship, the spirit is common support. Everybody is in one team supporting one another, and everyone contributes to the success of the journey and performs their role, which stems from their positions in the circle of influence and interest, as drawn in that lot. And this is the functional distribution referred to in the hadith. And those who are managing public affairs at all levels must assume their responsibility towards those at the bottom and restrain those who want to compromise the integrity of the ship. The strong have a responsibility towards the weak, the rich have responsibility towards the poor, and scholars have responsibility towards the laity, and most importantly, people of virtue have a responsibility towards all others. And these responsibilities arise from the value of fraternity and human dignity, and hope in the possibility of real coexistence. And we must adhere to the collective responsibility and the freedom of each of us are circumscribed by the impact on others. And this is why it is the responsibility of all of us to guide the freedoms of others. Whilst respecting their rights. And this guidance of actions and this control is not confined to one tool and one mechanism rather than others. It covers all. And the passengers of the ship are varied, but they are kept together by this charter, the charter of the ship, which is based on the principle that they can only survive if they cooperate and if they integrate together and adhere to coexistence and responsible freedoms. And think of what the ship would be like if they were involved in disagreement and contention. Briefly, I would say the spirit of the passengers of the ship calls upon us to be responsible in the environment, on the land and in the sea, and to stop immediately our wars and to adopt tolerance and joint work and to make the medication and the discoveries available for everybody, and the rich should help the poor. Rich countries should help the poor and should suspend their debt repayments until their situation improves. The spirit also calls upon us to provide stability and welfare for all. And to seek a world in which the fruits of intellect and our minds are available for everybody. They should not be monopolized by any party. We need a world in which countries compete for the good of all and to help the vulnerable. And this is the calling of the Abrahamic traditions. It also calls upon us to provide societies of security where the weak doesn't fear the injustice of the strong, and societies where we call for fraternity and cooperation. The spirit of the ship calls upon us to create a world for tomorrow where human dignity is respected, regardless of color, creeds, or race. And God tells us in the Quran that He has honored human beings and provided them all with sustenance on this earth. The spirit of the passengers of the ship also calls upon us to find compromises and middle ground and mutual compromises, which are the foundations of coexistence. And this is how we will be able to mediate for our current age, the birth of a new age, based on our responsibility to bring together, to create this balance between justice and love, or as Thomas Aquinas said, justice and mercy, and calls upon us to call upon the world to base itself on mutual care, and presents a new concept of humanity that goes beyond human rights and is based on equality and to raise it to the values of virtue, which brings us all into the bosom of fraternity and love.
لقد كشفت الأثبات حاليته جميع قصور المقاربات الأنانية التي لا تقيم وزنا المشتركات.
There have been approaches that were based on individual. So in the light of the above, we are also witness the necessity of international cooperation and the inadequacy of isolation and individual efforts. And to go beyond recognition to coexistence, to go beyond the selfish worlds, and to move beyond the separate entities that we have into one joint human societies.
ما تجلت في هذه الأزمة ضرورته حيث برزت الحاجة إلى ارتقاء التضامن عن الصيغ الجوفاء والممارسات الهامشية التي اختزلته فيها
And this has become evident in this crisis. There is a need to promote solidarity from empty formulas and peripheral activities, which the marketplace has reduced it to, and to reconnect it with the ethical contents and the values of mercy and aid and cooperation and benevolence, and to find common grounds on which these rights can be built. Ladies and gentlemen, the new alliance of virtue that we issued and ratified last year represents the finest conceptual and procedural embodiment of the metaphor of the ship's passengers, and so it can therefore be a strong reference point for this new beginning. I spoke here about the new alliance of virtue.
عبارة عن إثارات وصور ومنارات.
These are guiding lights to remind everybody to reignite the human consciousness and the morality of humanity. The Second World War was a shock to human consciousness, and the humanity then created a new international system based on the International Declaration of Human Rights. And we hope that this current crisis will be an opportunity for a new start and for the birth of a new human being based on a new vision of the world, based on virtue, a human being for human beings who can construct themselves in relation to their fellow man and the creatures beside them. And any delay of initiative in doing the right thing today holds the future of humanity hostage and threatens the future generation. And if the spirit of the ship passengers does not become dominant, is not our guiding light, then I fear for our future together on this ship. I greet you all, and my prayers to you all that God will assist you with success in explaining this idea of this spirit and to present it in the most appropriate form. And I thank you very much, and God's blessings and peace be with you all.
نشكر معالي العلامة عبد الله بن بية رئيس منتدى تعزيز السلم.
We thank His Excellency Sheikh Abdullah bin Baye,
العلمي الأعلى لجامعة محمد بن
the
زايد
president
للأمور
of the Forum for
الإنسانية
Promoting Peace in
ورئيس
Muslim
مجلس إمارات
Society,
الإفتاء الشرعي،
and the president of
نشكره
the
على
Higher Academic
كلمته
Council
الطيبة، وفعلا
of Mohammed bin
نستبشر
Zayed University
بعالم
for
يكون فيه
Humanities
سلام
and chairman
شامل
of the United Arab
ويتمثل
Emirates
قيم
Fatwa
روح ركاب
Council.
السفينة بإذن الله. نستأنف الآن
Now we
يعني
proceed
الجلسة الثانية
with
التي هي بعنوان
second
الجائحة وروح
session,
ركاب السفينة.
which is titled, in
ويترأس
fact,
هذه الجلسة
the pandemic
معالي
and the
الدكتور
metaphor
حمدان
of the
مسلم
ship's
المزروعي،
passengers.
وكذلك ندعو كل
The
من
moderator shall be
نيافة المطيران
Dr.
أنجيلوس
Hamdan
ومعالي
Musallam
الدكتور
al-Mazroui,
سالم المالك،
and we would like to
وكذلك
invite His
الدكتور
Eminence
باتريك
Archbishop
ديكسون
Angelo, Coptic Orthodox Archbishop
والدكتور
of
عبد
London,
الحميد عشاق. ندعوهم جميعا لحضور الجلسة الثانية
Dr.
التي
Salim
بعنوان
Al-Malik, Director General
الجائحة
of the Islamic
وروح
World
ركاب
Educational, Science
السفينة.
and Cultural
فليتفضلوا
Organization,
مشكورين.
and Ambassador Dr. Raja Naji.